This is the Italian Real Estate Podcast, here to help you with the ins and outs and basics of Italian real estate, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of the Italian Real Estate Podcast, presented by ItalianRealEstateLawyers.com. Of course, we are back at it again with Italian attorney Marco Permunian. How you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
I am doing great, thank you. And today we wanted to talk a bit about what you can find in Italy to keep the expectations versus reality balance in check a little bit, and to be able to understand what are the sizes of homes and apartments and properties that you can expect in Italy. So Marco, let's just jump straight into it and maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the norms that people can find regarding the sizes of properties in Italy.
So I believe we can start talking about cities and big cities and mid-sized cities, and then we can talk about the countryside and little villages maybe, because there are some differences between the two. When it comes to cities, it's not uncommon for people to live in an apartment. I'd say probably most of the population in a city lives in an apartment. I know that's not the rule for America, where there's like a more balanced number of houses versus apartments in a city. But in Italy, because of the limited amount of space and because of the very old buildings that we have in the Italian cities, you'll find that most people do live in an apartment. And a lot of foreign buyers are wondering what to expect when purchasing an apartment in a city. What's the normal size? And, people from abroad, they tend to know already that the sizes of Italian apartments are probably, and houses in general, probably smaller than the sizes of apartments or houses abroad. But what's the actual size? People are asking me that I should look for. What's okay for a family of 3 or a family of 4? Well, probably let's start by saying that the average size of an apartment in an Italian city is between 80 and 100 people. And that would be the average size for a family of 3 to 4 people. So 2 adults and 2 minor children, or 2 adults and 1 child. And 100 square meters is about equal to 1,007 square feet. So that's the average size for an apartment, where you'll find, say, 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, maybe 1.5 bathrooms, so like a big one and a small bathroom. So that's the minimum that you should look for if you have a family of 3 to 4 people, so if you have children. But what if you're not a family of 3 or 4 people and you're just a couple or single person? That you might find that the apartment for you in an Italian city is what's called a B locale, which is normally an apartment that is not less than 50 square meters, which is equal to roughly 560 square feet. And where the bedroom, there's 1 bedroom, of course, that is separate from the kitchen and the living room area, which are normally combined together in 1 room. I mean, in the older apartment, you'll find that there is a kitchen in a specific room, which is kind of small, and it's separate from the living room, which is also separate from the bedroom, and then 1 bathroom. So that would be what's inside a 50 square meters apartment. But I've also seen apartments that are smaller than that, especially in very populated Italian cities like Milan or Rome, where you might find, or Venice, especially Venice, where there is like no space, and so the apartments tend to be very small. You'll find some apartments that are called monolocali, where the bedroom is actually in the living room and the kitchen, everything is together. Only the bathroom is separate, and of course that's good only for 1 person, maybe a couple. And I'd say the minimum amount of space in this case would be 35 to 40 square meters. And of course, the rent or the purchase price if you're buying, it would be very low for a monolocale because people tend to stay in a monolocale for a limited amount of time because, of course, it's not comfortable to stay in an apartment that is that small.
That's interesting. So that's kind of at one end of the scale of kind of the minimums that you want to consider. But what would maybe be in a city the largest apartments that you might find? Like what are we talking about here?
So let me say that apartments that are bigger than the ones that I just described are not common, though you could find them. But the thing is, the standard apartment would be a maximum of 100 meters, probably with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. But you can find apartments that are bigger than that. But I guess that's not the norm. But I'd say the absolute maximum, except, those rare cases of luxury apartments or penthouses. But the maximum for a normal apartment the size could be like 140 meters, maybe. I doubt that you find a normal apartment that is bigger than that in an Italian city. That would be roughly 1,500 in terms of square feet. So 1,500 square feet. And an apartment like that would probably have like 2 to 3 bedrooms and 2 to 3 bathrooms and a kitchen and a living room, maybe a garage downstairs, 2 cars. So in an Italian city or a big city or mid-sized city, I think that's probably the biggest apartment that you can find if you're purchasing or if you are renting. If you're looking for a bigger unit, you should probably look for a house, but then it's not easy to find a single detached house in an Italian town, as we said at the beginning of this video.
Right. And so that's interesting to hear, though. When you do find a standalone home, a detached house, what are some of the normal sizes that you might be expecting to see just kind of across the board in general in Italy?
I'd say the average size for an Italian house is roughly 180 square meters, and that translates to roughly 2,000 square feet. So that's a standard house. It's not big, not small. Of course, you find exceptions everywhere. So if you want something bigger, it's possible to find it. It's also possible to find smaller houses, but that's probably the average. And it would be a 2-floor house with maybe a kitchen and a living room downstairs, an office, and upstairs, like 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Normally, there's also a bathroom downstairs, maybe with a laundry area, and that's pretty much it. And of course, you can expect to have like a small backyard. And in Italy, bifamiliari, which means 2 houses combined together for 2 families, are very common. And I'd say that the average size for a bifamiliare is like roughly 180 square meters. And the houses that they're building right now in Italy, they are mostly bifamiliare. So houses for 2 different families, which don't have to be friends or know each other. It's very common in Italy to go live in a house where half of the house is yours and the other half is for another family. And you also buy completely separately. And of course, the 2 backyards are completely separate. There is normally a wall that separates the 2 backyards, or a set of little trees that will separate your area from their area. The 2 garages are separate. But that's what you can normally find in a residential area. And some general contractors that are building houses with the purpose of selling them, they're actually building that type of houses because that's what people are looking for, because it's a relatively inexpensive option if you're looking to buy a brand new house. And they're building very nice, modern bifamiliari, and people are liking them very much. Of course, if you want like a single detached house, you can find those too. Maybe they tend to be on the bigger end, and so bigger in size. And you can find both old houses to be renovated that are single detached houses, and new houses that general contractors are building. But normally they don't build those if they're not commissioned, if that type of house has not been commissioned. So normally you'll have someone who hires a general contractor to build a single detached house. But companies, like I said a moment ago, that just build to sell with the purpose of selling, they will mostly build bifamiliari, duplex, basically. And of course, when talking about these duplex options, we're talking about outside of the cities, of the major cities, and mostly in small villages and small cities, residential areas where these small cities and villages are expanding. Definitely not. We're not talking about the center of the city where you mostly will find apartments. But just to go back to living in a city, in an apartment building, a lot of clients have been asking, well, how many units will there be in the buildings? And, will the building be very crowded? And I think in Italy, well, it depends on the city, on the size of the city. For example, Rovigo, where our office is located, which is a 60,000 people city, we have quite a few apartment buildings. And I want to say very few exceed the 10 to 12 units. And the average is probably 7, 8 units. But if you go and look for an apartment building in bigger cities like Milan or Rome, you will find also apartment like condominiums with 15 to 20 units, and the number of floors could be anywhere from 4 to 6 floors, 7, maybe 8. But I would say that it's unusual in Italy for a building to be to have more than 8 floors, and that's because all the buildings in Italy are relatively old, and years ago they were not building very tall buildings. So the buildings that are in America are definitely bigger and with more units. I'm thinking about New York City, for example, where it's not unusual to find buildings with 30 floors and with 100 units. Well, that's not common in Italy, of course.
Very interesting to hear all of this, but I do think it's a great place to round out the episode. So I just wanted to say another thank you for making yourself available for recording this episode of the Italian Real Estate Podcast. But of course, Marco, if anybody is interested in purchasing a home in Italy, how can they get in contact with you and your team?
People can contact us through our website, italianrealestatelawyers.com, or give us a call. Our number is on the website.
That's fantastic. And of course, if you're interested in more information about purchasing property in Italy, be sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel as well as the audio-only podcast. But of course, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you are automatically subscribed to the Italian Citizenship Podcast, another project that Marco and I collaborate on, where we talk about the legalities of living in Italy, as well as getting Italian citizenship. And of course, if you're interested in more content about life in Italy, living abroad as an Italian dual citizen expat, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia, or you can also find the audio-only podcast, Not Your Average Globetrotter, on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. But of course, Mr. Marco Permunian, thank you so much for making yourself available again for this episode of the Italian Real Estate Podcast presented by ItalianRealEstatelawyers.com. I'm Rafael Di Furia. Stay safe and healthy out there, and we will see you all next time. Later.
Thank you.